In the late 1980s, thousands of Guatemalans fled their country and migrated to the United States, escaping political unrest and violence. The small South Florida village of Indiantown had an abundance of jobs due to the fruit harvest, and thousands of Guatemalans came pouring into the area looking for work. Recognizing an opportunity to minister to these immigrants, Glenn Rife created a special mobile chapel and regularly held services at the Blue Camp, an apartment complex for migrant workers in Indiantown. Juan, a Guatemalan man known to be a drunkard, lived in the Blue Camp apartment building. Sidney Grant, Glenn Rife's assistant, asked Juan on several occasions to attend services at the mobile chapel, but Juan showed no interest, rejecting the invitations. One Sunday, in desperation, he decided his only option was suicide. He went to Okeechobee, a town about 30 miles to the north, planning to drown himself in a river. Entering the water, he let himself sink to the bottom. Two American men fishing on the river saw Juan go under the water's surface and raced to his rescue, afraid he was attempting suicide. They pulled him out of the river, but Juan was furious and began to fight. He did not want to live. He did not want to be rescued. Juan struggled to free himself from his rescuers, desperately trying to plunge himself under the water's surface once again. The two men continued fighting to stop him and began to drag him out of the water a second time when Juan broke free, lunging towards deeper water. Again, the fishermen went after him to pull him to safety. The men almost had the tired and more subdued Juan out of the water when for a third time he managed to free himself from their grasp. Finally, the men were able to pull him up onto the bank of the river, where Juan lay recovering from the fight. The fishermen had saved him from committing suicide. This time, Juan promised his rescuers he would not jump in again. That same day, he returned to Indiantown and went to the mobile chapel where Glenn Rife was preaching. At the end of the gospel presentation, Glenn invited anyone spiritually unresolved to come forward and accept Christ. Juan was the first person to come to the front, and right there on the floor of the semi-truck, he turned his life over to God. He became a faithful follower of Christ, married a Christian lady, graduated from the Spanish Bible Institute, and became a Spanish pastor serving in Florida. A life transformed by the power of the gospel.
In 1976, we decided to leave Guatemala and come back to the States because we had to put our boys in school here. We drove by car from Guatemala through Mexico and up to the United States, and finally ended up here in Florida, where I had a job teaching in the high school here in Hope Sound. We hadn't been here very long, and some of our friends here that we met were trying to start a work in Indiantown. There's a camp out there, they called it the Blue Camp, which looked like a two-story L-shaped motel, and there's a lot of migrant workers there that would come and work in the orange and grapefruit harvest. Refugees from Guatemala started coming in because there was a war in Guatemala between the communist guerrillas and the Guatemalan government. And both sides were blaming these Indians from western Guatemala for being on one side or the other, and so they were being decimated by both groups. These Guatemalan Indians found that there was work in Indian town. In fact, I heard that the first family that came here actually walked most of the way from New Orleans to here. So the word spread and they started coming into Florida by the droves. Having grown up in Guatemala, I knew I had a certain amount of rapport with them, so I started going out to see them. On the weekends, we had services for them, and we taught them about the love of Christ and the gospel and how it could transform their lives. Many of them had never heard of the gospel before. In fact, a large majority of them only had their own pagan, idolatrous worship. So it was an open door, and being here in America, under new circumstances, they were open to hear the gospel. I was interested in trying to meet their social needs as well as their spiritual needs. So when they were coming into Indian town, they didn't know how to adjust to the American way. I tried to find a place to rent out there where we could have classes for them. And in the Blue Camp, there was absolutely no room at all, and there's no place I could rent. It didn't work to have outdoor classes because of the weather. Sometimes it was so hot, other times it was raining, so much disturbance. So the Lord gave me the idea of using some mobile chapels, or 18-wheelers. I had a couple brother-in-laws that worked for a trucking company up in Virginia. So I talked to them, and they talked to their owner, the boss, and he agreed to sell me a couple of semi-trucks, 18-wheelers, that we were able to convert into classrooms, and we also used them as mobile chapels on weekends. We had 50 chairs that we used in the mobile chapel, but on one occasion, I counted 120 people. That's actual count. They more than filled up the chairs. In fact, the pictures of it, you couldn't even see chairs. Everything was packed tight full of people coming to hear the stories and the message of the gospel that we preached to the people. It was really nice and comfortable there because we had air conditioning, and these people in the rooms had no air conditioning. So on a hot summer night, they liked to come to our church because it was cool there. So the Lord used all of these conveniences to help draw the people into our mobile chapel. It was a very exciting program, and I really enjoyed working with these Guatemalan refugees. It was 30 years ago that we started the Mobile Chapel Ministry here. It's hard to believe that 30 years have gone by. This is now just a vacant lot. There used to be a big building here called the Blue Camp. The Lord gave me the idea of the mobile chapel, and we brought one. We drive it right in here, had speakers on the inside and outside, and we'd start that up, and I would talk to them in Spanish, tell them that we were getting ready to have a service and everyone was invited, and we thank God for the many souls that were reached here. A lot of them have gone now to different places, not only here in the United States, but in different countries, Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras, and they've started churches down there. But this is where it all began, and we thank God for the ministry that He gave us, and only eternity will show how many souls were actually went to the Lord, and how many of these that have left here are still working for the Lord. Thank God for His help. Among the volunteers who helped us in this ministry in evangelizing, inviting people to church, and encouraging people were Sidney Grant, Harold Martin, Jose Cancio, and Bart and Julie Thompson.
I was part of the children's ministry of the mobile chapel. We would go out and hold children's services on Sunday afternoons. When I was 13, I first visited Guatemala, visited my grandparents, and I fell in love with the Spanish people. When the opportunity came to work with the mobile chapel for my Christian service in college, I immediately agreed and was excited to do it. We would go out to Indian Town and go around the neighborhoods and invite the kids to church, then bring them to the mobile chapel. And I just remember how much they loved to sing, they loved our crafts, they had a lot of sticky fingers, but they had a good time learning about Jesus, and they always put a smile on our face. This was a great opportunity for me to work side by side with missionaries here in the United States. I enjoyed being able to be a part of a mission field close to home, and today I am now the registrar for the Spanish Bible Institute because of my connection with the Spanish Ministries. I am thankful that I had the opportunity to work with Mobile Chapel. It gave me insight into missionary work in the United States, and Glenn Rife very much impacted my life and missions.
One of the important aspects of this ministry was getting the mobile chapels from place to place, and we had to follow a schedule. They had to be on time, and we appreciated all the different drivers that would fill in, and none of them had an accident or got a ticket. One of our great drivers was Phil Case.
My role in the Mobile Chapel Ministry was being one of the drivers that took the semis to different locations. I've always had a soft heart toward missions, and I wanted to be involved in a ministry that was engaged in actual soul winning. And I love to drive truck, especially in connection with such a throbbing ministry as the Mobile Chapel. I was privileged to witness firsthand the godly, effective passion demonstrated by Dr. Glenn Rife and Sidney Grant through their preaching. This wasn't a game or a gig or some random Christian busyness, but a genuine passion for the lost. I was on the front row. I was in the trenches, so to speak, watching God draw people to Himself, watching those new Christians change and then begin to bring their friends. And I observed as God multiplied His harvest through His ministry by using His willing servants. My involvement with the Mobile Chapel ministry impacted my view, my mentality toward ministry, toward outreach. It opened my eyes to understand the many facets, keys, tools to ministry. God truly can use us in whatever we do if we do all that we do to the glory of God. It helped me to see that I can serve God with whatever talents and abilities He has entrusted to me. I just have to be willing to obey as God opens the door.
The Mobile Chapel ministry was more than just religious education and evangelism and winning people to the Lord. We also tried to meet their social needs. So we had programs to teach them how to live in America. We felt like if we could help meet their social needs, then they would listen to what we had to say about their spiritual needs. The ministry of the Mobile Chapel wasn't just for Indian Town, but we also sent mobile chapels to West Palm Beach, Lake Worth, Riviera Beach, Belle Glade, Okeechobee. Many churches were started as a result of this ministry. When I first got the vision of using mobile chapels, I had no idea what the result would be. In fact, most people thought I had a crazy idea, and they thought it was a waste of time, a waste of money. I had a little trouble even trying to raise money to buy the mobile chapels and equipment. But after it's all over with, as I look back and I see the results of what's happened here in the States and what's happened in so many foreign countries, I thank God that He gave me the vision. It wasn't my own idea, but God, I feel, showed it to me. And when God gives you a vision, He'll help it to come to pass, and He'll use it for His glory. And that's the way I feel about the mobile chapel. It was God, it was His ministry, and He helped it to become fruitful.